Nissan is in serious trouble. The company is in a full-blown panic, desperately trying to stay afloat by slashing prices and offering massive discounts across the board. But make no mistake, these deals aren't signs of good bargain. They're a silent alarm, warning that something is deeply wrong behind the scenes. In what felt like the blink of an eye, Nissan's profits all but disappeared. The discounts? They're not saving the company. They're just masking a much bigger problem. Not long ago, Nissan was a serious contender in the global automotive industry, a brand trusted by investors and consumers alike. But then came a financial collapse that felt less like a downturn and more like a complete detonation. In a matter of months, Nissan lost nearly all of its profitability. Investors were blindsided, poring over bleak quarterly reports that offered little hope. Operating costs soared, advertising budgets were slashed, and production lines were left running with no buyers in sight. This wasn't just another earnings miss. It was a harsh wake-up call about the vulnerability of modern manufacturing, especially when a company loses its grip on consumer trust and excitement. Internally, Nissan began shutting down once promising projects, shelving vital research that could have turned the tide, and freezing hiring company-wide. The question now is not just whether Nissan can recover, but whether it can survive at all. And if it doesn't, many will be left wondering what went wrong. Stay with us, because what you're about to learn could permanently change how you view the automotive world. Meanwhile, Nissan's decline was only magnified by the growing success of its rivals, automakers that proved far more agile in adapting to a rapidly evolving industry. While competitors leaned hard into electrification and advanced driver assistance systems, Nissan lagged behind, making its offerings feel increasingly outdated. Industry insiders have been sounding the alarm for some time, pointing to a string of troubling decisions. The company had overextended itself, chasing sales volume instead of focusing on quality. Research and development, once a pillar of its competitive edge, had been underfunded for years, all while Nissan leaned on a reputation that was slowly losing its shine. Consumer preferences were shifting, and Nissan sales channels weren't keeping up. While other manufacturers thrive on the growing demand for crossovers and hybrids, Nissan's lineup felt stagnant, powered by outdated drivetrains and wrapped in designs that failed to excite or inspire. The result was a staggering collapse. Nearly 100% of profit wiped out in a shockingly short span of time. The warning signs were there, loud and clear, but they went unheeded until it was far too late. A fall this dramatic doesn't happen in isolation. It reveals breakdowns at every level: executive leadership, brand vision, and a deep disconnect from the pulse of the market. Nissan was left with bloated overhead costs and plummeting revenue, trapped in a downward spiral that couldn't be stopped overnight. But beyond the financial wreckage lies a deeper wound, one that doesn't show up in balance sheets: the betrayal of trust. Generations of customers had counted on Nissan for practical, reliable vehicles. Their sedans and SUVs were often the go-to for families seeking affordable, worry-free transportation. That trust was hard-earned, and once broken, incredibly difficult to restore. One of the biggest tipping points? The widespread issues with Nissan's CVT, continuously variable transmission, which sparked frustration and, eventually, an exodus of once loyal customers. We'll break all of that down in just a moment. But first, if you're finding value in this story, take a second to subscribe. It really helps us bring you more content like this. Thanks. Then came the breaking point: the issue with Nissan's continuously variable transmissions, CVTs. Marketed as a forward-thinking innovation meant to deliver smoother rides and improved fuel efficiency, these transmissions quickly turned into a liability. Instead of enhancing the driving experience, they became a symbol of Nissan's deeper problems. Owners began reporting jerky acceleration, unsettling whining noises, and, in many cases, total transmission failure well before the odometer hit 100,000 miles. For many, repairs ran into the thousands, sometimes requiring complete transmission replacements just a few years after purchase. What began as a few scattered complaints soon exploded into a full-blown crisis. Social media lit up with frustrated owners sharing their horror stories, amplifying the damage to Nissan's already shaky reputation. Lawsuits followed, accusing the company of ignoring known defects and sidestepping responsibility. The damage wasn't just mechanical, it was emotional. Families who had stood by Nissan for years, some having bought multiple vehicles from the brand, now felt deeply betrayed. The company's response often felt dismissive, with patchwork fixes and limited support that failed to reassure its loyal base. This erosion of trust had massive consequences. Once a car maker loses its reputation for basic dependability, every new model is met with skepticism. Consumers didn't forget the viral videos of cars stalling in traffic or the heated forum debates detailing four-figure repair nightmares. And while competitors were refining and improving their powertrains, Nissan's name became associated with risk. The fallout was swift. Longtime customers fled to rival brands, triggering a consumer exodus that further strained the company's inventory and forced even deeper discounts. But those discounts weren't a strategy, they were a symptom, a desperate attempt to clear lots that should have been bustling with demand. And while a single issue like CVD problems might have been survivable on its own, Nissan's internal structure wasn't strong enough to absorb the blow. What we were witnessing was more than just a slump. It was the unraveling of a once-respected automotive giant. But as consumers began walking away, another critical pillar of Nissan's business was quietly collapsing: the dealership network that had once powered the brand's expansion. This wasn't just a market shift. It was the death knell of the traditional dealer model, and Nissan's version of it was buckling under the pressure. For years, these dealerships had weathered everything from changing consumer trends to economic downturns and corporate reshuffles. But this crisis was different. It was deeper, more corrosive, and far more widespread. Across the country, a growing number of Nissan dealers were operating at a loss. Some started closing their doors altogether. When a significant portion of a brand's retail network is no longer financially viable, that's not a bump in the road, it's a structural failure. The margins in automotive retail are already notoriously thin, but Nissan's situation had pushed them to the breaking point. Selling vehicles at or near cost might have moved a few units, but left dealers with barely enough to cover operating expenses, staff salaries, and essential services. In many regions, dealerships found themselves sitting on lots full of unsold cars, unable to offload them without incurring losses on every sale. What little profit dealers managed to squeeze out often came from used car trade-ins or service contracts, revenue streams that depend on a steady flow of satisfied, repeat customers. But with trust in the brand shattered and foot traffic drying up, even those fallback options started to fade. One by one, Nissan logos began disappearing from dealership facades. Some store owners consolidated their locations, while others abandoned the brand altogether, shifting investments to more profitable automotive franchises. The impact was more than just corporate. These closures sent shockwaves through local economies. Laid-off employees were suddenly thrust into uncertain job markets, and town halls and local business councils began raising concerns over disappearing automotive jobs. Municipalities that had once offered tax breaks to attract Nissan franchises were now staring down revenue shortfalls. In a last-ditch effort, Nissan Corporate began pushing aggressive financing deals in hopes of boosting sales. But these strategies often had the opposite effect, further eroding dealer margins and sparking resentment among franchise owners who felt abandoned and misled. It became painfully obvious the entire structure depended on a steady stream of consumer confidence, and that confidence was now gone. So the question loomed large: if families no longer trusted the brand, and if dealers no longer saw a future in selling its vehicles, how long could Nissan, as a massive global organization, continue to function? And if it didn't survive, what kind of ripple effect would its fall have on the broader industry? These aren't just hypotheticals. They're the defining questions of the next chapter in Nissan's increasingly turbulent story. One that will only grow more complicated as the global market continues to shift, and as new competitors circle, eyeing the widening cracks in Nissan's once solid armor. One of the most damaging decisions in Nissan's recent history has been its quiet but relentless turn toward fleet sales. What seemed like a short-term fix to move inventory became a slow-acting poison that hollowed the brand from within. Fleet sales, bulk orders to rental agencies, government bodies, and corporate fleets aren't a sign of success. In fact, they often signal the opposite: that a brand can no longer rely on everyday consumers to buy its cars. Once seen as a leader in practical, dependable vehicles for families, Nissan began drifting away from that identity. Cars that once sat proudly in suburban driveways started showing up more often in airport rental lots and corporate garages, places that lack any emotional connection between driver and brand. At a glance, this shift looked like smart business. Fleet deals meant steady sales numbers and cleared out bloated inventories. For dealerships, it offered a temporary sense of relief. But beneath that surface was a dangerous erosion of value. Fleet buyers aren't loyal. They're focused entirely on price and efficiency. And when too many of a brand's vehicles end up in fleets, it sends a message: these aren't cars people want, they're cars people settle for. The damage ripples outward. Fleet vehicles re-enter the market quickly, saturating the used car landscape and dragging down resale values. That makes new buyers wary, further cheapening the perception of the brand. Instead of being seen as aspirational or dependable, Nissan became associated with default choice cars, the ones you drive when you have no better option. Worse, this dependence on fleets creates a dangerous feedback loop. Corporate orders mask the decline in individual consumer demand, giving factory executives a false sense of stability. Production stays high, but real interest is shrinking. Meanwhile, the voice of the everyday buyer, the one who once shaped Nissan's direction, is drowned out. Preferences, frustrations, and expectations vanish into the noise of spreadsheets and bulk transactions. In losing that authentic dialogue with real drivers, Nissan also lost its ability to read the road ahead. What followed was a series of missteps and missed opportunities, all rooted in a widening disconnect between the brand and the people it was meant to serve. This strategic blindness, born from over-reliance on fleet sales, didn't just mask the problem, it became part of it. And now, with the foundation eroded and trust fractured, Nissan faces a future that grows more uncertain with every passing quarter. Now here's the thing. Fleet sales were only the beginning of Nissan's internal unraveling. As the company buried itself in corporate contracts and quarterly sales figures, something far more vital began to erode from within: innovation. In an industry that thrives on progress, Nissan experienced what could only be described as an innovation blackout, a stunning loss of momentum at a time when the rest of the automotive world was speeding ahead. A decade ago, Nissan was at the forefront of a revolution. The launch of the all-electric Nissan Leaf in 2010 wasn't just a big move, it was bold. It positioned Nissan as a pioneer in the race toward electrification, one of the first mainstream automakers to bet on an EV future. But what started as a leap into the future quickly became a stumble. While competitors sprinted forward, debuting sleek plug-ins, high-performance EVs, and sophisticated hybrid systems, Nissan stalled out. The Leaf received only modest updates, with barely noticeable improvements to range or performance. Its design aged poorly, and its excitement faded into irrelevance. Meanwhile, Tesla captured the world's attention, setting the gold standard for electric innovation. Hyundai and Kia pushed boundaries with their Ioniq and EV6 platforms, vehicles that felt futuristic and fresh. Even legacy rivals like Toyota aggressively integrated hybrid tech across nearly every segment, creating a full-spectrum approach to electrification that left Nissan looking archaic by comparison. Nissan's lineup, on the other hand, remained frustratingly rooted in the past. Core models like the Rogue, Altima, and Sentra clung to traditional combustion engines. The long-promised hybrid Rogue, a model consumers had been eagerly awaiting, faced delay after delay, with its launch now reportedly pushed back to 2027, almost 2 full decades after hybrid technology became mainstream. This wasn't just a slow product cycle. It was a signal of something deeper. The innovation stall at Nissan was symptomatic of a company plagued by internal dysfunction. A culture of bold experimentation had given way to risk aversion. Cost-cutting took priority over research and development. Engineers who once had freedom to explore ambitious ideas found their projects shelved, their budgets cut. And with fleet sales providing just enough short-term stability to keep the lights on, leadership felt little urgency to push forward. The ambition that once defined Nissan had all but vanished. What replaced it was a sense of corporate inertia, an attitude of survival, not growth. And what's wild is how sharply this contrasts with the Nissan of just a few years earlier. A brand that once led now lagged, not for lack of talent, but for lack of direction. That loss of direction, it turns out, wasn't just cultural, it was deeply tied to a power vacuum left in the wake of one of the most dramatic executive collapses in automotive history. Because Carlos Ghosn wasn't just Nissan CEO, he was the architect of its global resurgence, and his downfall would paralyze the brand in ways no one fully understood until it was too late. He was Nissan's architect, its savior, and ultimately, its greatest disruption. Carlos Ghosn wasn't just a CEO, he was the man who resurrected the brand from the brink in the early 2000s. With sharp instincts and an even sharper cost-cutting blade, Ghosn engineered the powerful Renault-Nissan alliance, streamlining operations, slashing inefficiencies, and restoring profitability to a company that many had counted out. His tenure was marked by bold moves, clear vision, and an unshakable command of global strategy. But that legacy unraveled in dramatic fashion. In 2018, Ghosn was arrested in Japan on charges of financial misconduct, an event that sent shockwaves through the global auto industry. The spectacle didn't stop there. What followed was straight out of a Hollywood thriller. Ghosn's escape from house arrest, allegedly smuggled out of Japan in a musical equipment case, turned him from a high-powered executive into an international fugitive almost overnight. It wasn't just a scandal, it was a corporate earthquake. His downfall didn't just damage Nissan's reputation. It left the company effectively decapitated. In the wake of Ghosn's arrest, Nissan was thrown into chaos. Leadership changed hands rapidly, starting with Hiroto Saikawa, Ghosn's immediate successor, who himself stepped down less than a year later after becoming embroiled in his own controversy. One executive after another cycled through, each struggling to gain traction, credibility, or cohesive direction. Worse, the alliance Ghosn had painstakingly built with Renault started to fracture. Internal tensions surged as political battles between the two companies overshadowed strategy. Boardroom infighting and turf wars replaced collaboration. The executive focus shifted from product innovation and market positioning to managing damage control and navigating governance dysfunction. Without a visionary leader to steer the ship, Nissan fell into a defensive, reactionary stance. Strategic decisions were delayed. Innovation efforts stalled. Projects were watered down or shelved entirely. The strong, confident identity the brand once projected, whether in electric mobility, performance engineering, or practical value, began to blur into confusion. Nissan wasn't just dealing with a leadership vacuum, it was suffering from strategic paralysis. While competitors doubled down on electrification, digital ecosystems, and next-gen mobility, Nissan drifted. It responded late, if at all, to seismic shifts in consumer preferences and market dynamics. What was once a brand with bold ambition had become one that was simply trying to hold itself together. And without a strong hand at the wheel, Nissan couldn't see or steer its way out of the storm. Arguably, the most devastating consequence of Nissan's leadership vacuum has been the slow, painful unraveling of its core brand identity, an erosion that strikes at the very heart of what the company once stood for. What was once a clearly defined brand, offering affordable reliability with a hint of innovation, has become a blur of contradictions. Nissan, once confident in its place in the automotive world, now seems to be having an identity crisis. Ask 5 different consumers what Nissan represents today, and you're likely to get 5 very different answers. Is it a budget-friendly brand? A tech-forward innovator? Or just a fading legacy automaker struggling to stay relevant? Walk through a Nissan dealership, and that confusion becomes palpable. The vehicle lineup feels disjointed, with models that lack cohesion in design, purpose, or positioning. Interiors are often outdated, tech offerings trail behind competitors, and the overall aesthetic swings awkwardly between conservative and experimental, yet rarely resonates. This isn't just a matter of design inconsistency, it cuts deeper. Nissan's brand confusion is fundamentally damaging its ability to connect with buyers. While competitors like Hyundai, Toyota, and Tesla have carved out focused, emotionally resonant brand identities, Nissan floats in uncertainty. Hyundai feels fresh and forward-thinking. Toyota screams durability and hybrid leadership. Tesla? A tech status symbol. But Nissan? It's unclear, and that's a problem. Brand loyalty is built on trust, emotional connection, and a clearly understood value proposition. Right now, Nissan offers none of those. For many consumers, there's simply no compelling reason to choose a Nissan over its rivals. Without a confident identity, new buyers drift elsewhere. Longtime customers grow disillusioned. The brand that once symbolized accessible innovation now risks being seen as irrelevant, a relic from another era, quietly fading into the background. In response, Nissan has launched what it calls the ARC plan, short for ambition, renewal, and knowledge. The plan promises 7 all-new models in just 3 years. On paper, it's bold. It sounds like the comeback story the company desperately needs. But whether it's a genuine strategy for reinvention or just a desperate swing in the dark remains to be seen. Because unless the ARC plan brings not just new models, but a revived sense of purpose, cohesion, and identity, even this ambitious overhaul could fall flat. Nissan doesn't just need new cars. It needs a reason for people to care about those cars. And unless it solves this crisis of identity soon, the confusion will turn into abandonment. In an industry that moves fast and forgets faster, that could spell the end for a brand that once helped define the very landscape it now risks being erased from. Nissan's leadership has framed the art plan as nothing short of revolutionary, a sweeping effort to electrify its entire lineup and refresh its brand image in hopes of regaining lost ground in the brutally competitive automotive marketplace. On the surface, it's a bold, forward-looking vision meant to signal a comeback. But when you peel back the glossy marketing and buzzwords, that ambition begins to resemble something far less inspiring, a desperate cry for survival. At the center of Nissan's strategy is a heavy bet on electrification, driven by substantial investments in next-generation battery technology. Specifically, the company is banking on solid-state batteries, cells that promise greater range, faster charging, and lower production costs than the lithium-ion packs that dominate the market today. In theory, it's a game-changing innovation. In practice, it's a massive gamble. Nissan has only just begun production trials, and full-scale availability isn't expected until 2028. That's years away in an industry that moves at breakneck speed. Meanwhile, competitors like Tesla, Hyundai, and Toyota are already delivering results. They've established credibility and carved out dominant positions in the electric vehicle market. Nissan, by contrast, is promising a breakthrough that's still on the drawing board. To critics, the art plan isn't a visionary roadmap. It's a frantic attempt to buy time, a high-stakes marketing push aimed more at reassuring nervous investors than rebuilding consumer trust. And that trust is already on shaky ground. Years of quality issues, underwhelming products, and missed innovation windows have made many buyers skeptical of Nissan's promises. In this context, the art plan isn't just a refresh, it's a necessity. With outdated models piling up on dealership lots and a reputation tarnished by mechanical issues and customer frustration, Nissan doesn't have the luxury of failure. These 7 new models can't just be good. They need to be exceptional. But even that might not be enough. Industry insiders warn that the aggressive timeline Nissan has set for this product overhaul is risky, possibly even reckless. Any misstep, delay, or quality flaw could turn this plan from a lifeline into a fatal miscalculation. The reality is harsh. The art plan isn't a choice, it's a last stand. And if it falters, there may not be another opportunity to recover. So the uncomfortable question must be asked, is the art plan truly the start of Nissan's rebirth? Or is it just smoke and mirrors, a well-polished illusion meant to mask deeper problems? Unfortunately, Nissan's recent history doesn't inspire much confidence. While executives offer reassurances and celebrate future potential, the company has yet to deliver immediate, tangible progress. Without that, this ambitious plan risks becoming little more than an expensive distraction from the fundamental issues that continue to haunt the brand. And as Nissan scrambles to reinvent itself with promises and prototypes, yet another desperate measure begins to emerge, one that's equally fraught with risk. Nissan's leadership has framed the art plan as nothing short of revolutionary, a sweeping effort to electrify its entire lineup and refresh its brand image in hopes of regaining lost ground in the brutally competitive automotive marketplace. On the surface, it's a bold, forward-looking vision meant to signal a comeback. But when you peel back the glossy marketing and buzzwords, that ambition begins to resemble something far less inspiring, a desperate cry for survival. At the center of Nissan's strategy is a heavy bet on electrification, driven by substantial investments in next-generation battery technology. Specifically, the company is banking on solid-state batteries, cells that promise greater range, faster charging, and lower production costs than the lithium-ion packs that dominate the market today. In theory, it's a game-changing innovation. In practice, it's a massive gamble. Nissan has only just begun production trials, and full-scale availability isn't expected until 2028. That's years away in an industry that moves at breakneck speed. Meanwhile, competitors like Tesla, Hyundai, and Toyota are already delivering results. They've established credibility and carved out dominant positions in the electric vehicle market. Nissan, by contrast, is promising a breakthrough that's still on the drawing board. To critics, the art plan isn't a visionary roadmap. It's a frantic attempt to buy time, a high-stakes marketing push aimed more at reassuring nervous investors than rebuilding consumer trust. And that trust is already on shaky ground. Years of quality issues, underwhelming products, and missed innovation windows have made many buyers skeptical of Nissan's promises. In this context, the art plan isn't just a refresh, it's a necessity. With outdated models piling up on dealership lots and a reputation tarnished by mechanical issues and customer frustration, Nissan doesn't have the luxury of failure. These 7 new models can't just be good. They need to be exceptional. But even that might not be enough. Industry insiders warn that the aggressive timeline Nissan has set for this product overhaul is risky, possibly even reckless. Any misstep, delay, or quality flaw could turn this plan from a lifeline into a fatal miscalculation. The reality is harsh. The art plan isn't a choice, it's a last stand. And if it falters, there may not be another opportunity to recover. So the uncomfortable question must be asked. Is the art plan truly the start of Nissan's rebirth? Or is it just smoke and mirrors, a well-polished illusion meant to mask deeper problems? Unfortunately, Nissan's recent history doesn't inspire much confidence. While executives offer reassurances and celebrate future potential, the company has yet to deliver immediate, tangible progress. Without that, this ambitious plan risks becoming little more than an expensive distraction from the fundamental issues that continue to haunt the brand. And as Nissan scrambles to reinvent itself with promises and prototypes, yet another desperate measure begins to emerge, one that's equally fraught with risk.